So I just finished Marvel's Spider-Man 2, and before I get into my thoughts and review of the game, I just want to say that there is some mild spoilers pertaining to the opening sequence and opening boss fight of the game, mainly because I wanted to avoid later spoilers and the later stuff within the game, so just be mindful of that going into it. That being said, let's get into it. Marvel Spider-Man 2 is unquestionably the best Spider-Man game to come from Insomniac Studios, and quite frankly, some of their best work. Not only has Marvel Spider-Man 2 taken everything that they've learned from both Miles Morales and 2018, but they've enhanced everything. Everything that you loved about the first two games has been improved, and some of the things that you didn't like about 2018 and Miles Morales has been removed or altered to fit a better gameplay experience. So kicking things off, when you start the game, you go through into the settings, and the settings are what you expect them to be from a first-party game, but one of the things to make note of is that there's two graphical options, both fidelity and performance. Now, one thing to make note of is that ray tracing is on no matter which mode you choose. The game also has the ability to, for VRR displays, for those who have it, you can play the game in fidelity mode at 40 frames per second, or you could play performance and go above 60 FPS. Now, for me personally, in my playthrough, I opted for the performance mode, and the game ran like a dream. It looked great, it felt great, it was buttery smooth. I didn't notice any sort of frame rate issues of any kind. The game, in terms of raw performance, ran nearly flawlessly. As for the game itself, it's what you come to expect. Most of the things that are here were in the present games. Your swinging is the same, the combat is more or less the same, but they just improved upon it. What do I mean by this? So one of the things that I loved about Spider-Man 2 is how they took the already great swinging that was in both Miles in 2018 and improved upon it by adding the wingsuit. You would think the wingsuit itself would not necessarily add much to the fluidity of the swinging, but it really does improve the game immensely. The traversal in this game is far and above what it was in the previous games. Swinging feels smooth, it's quick, and the best part about it is utilizing the PlayStation 5's hardware. The swinging is actually faster. It even gets even more faster if you upgrade the traversal skill tree to make it even faster than what it normally is. So the traversal, the swinging aspect of the game is absolutely fantastic. The combat itself, it's mostly the same as it was in 2018 and in Miles Morales, and that's not a bad thing. They did add one new touch to the basic combat, and that is now you have the ability to parry. Some enemies, you actually have to parry them in order to counter them, and they even added attacks to the game that are actually unblockables and unparryable, meaning that you must dodge the attack outright in order to not get hit. So they did add minor tweaks to the combat to improve it, but the combat is essentially what it was from the previous two games. Another thing that I liked about it is how diverse the skill trees are in this game. So you have a skill tree for Peter, you have a skill tree for Miles, and then you have a universal tree that applies to both. So you will spend your time leveling, whichever preference you are. My recommendation would be to balance it out because you do bounce between Miles and Peter very frequently. Now, when it comes to the main campaign, you are set in stone to who you have to use for the main story missions. When you're roaming the world, you're free to do any side activity with whomever, but there are designated activities that are specific to Peter or specific to Miles, as are the side missions. So these are things that are meant to be aware of. Also, with the upgrades is you can also have various suits. There is a lot of suits in the game. There is specific to each character. So, one suit is available for Peter, may not be available for Miles, and vice versa. You also have multiple abilities that you can allocate to the button maps, allowing you to choose which abilities you want to use once you have access to them. So overall, while the main combat of the game is the same, The abilities and how you level up each character makes it feel unique, but right in comparison to the previous two games. Now, obviously, this is a narrative-driven experience, so how is the story? First and foremost, I will say that Kraven the Hunter steals the show for me personally. I know a lot of people like to talk about Venom, and Venom is amazing in this game. I won't talk much about him for spoiler reasons, but to me, Kraven is the one who steals the show. The voice actor was fantastic. The way they wrote Kraven, the way the character grows and how he progresses through the story. He was an amazing villain for this universe, and it was a brilliant on how they handled him, and I loved the performance. I loved the character. I like how they treated him. It was just utterly fantastic. Obviously, there are other story beats. I don't want to get into them because of spoiler purposes, but safe to say that the overall story is what you expect. If you are a Spider-Man fan and you're familiar with Venom's origin and how he comes to be, you get the idea of how this game's going to play out before you get into it. But I will say that Insomniac did a very good job of throwing in some nice surprises that you may not expect when you go into it if you know the source material. Another thing that I found very, very interesting was the missions regarding Mary Jane. Now, in Spider-Man 2018, I did not like those missions. Going into this game, I expected to also not like those missions because I'm here to play as Spider-Man, not as Mary Jane Watson. Thankfully, to my surprise, the Mary Jane missions were actually significantly improved and were far more enjoyable than they were in its predecessor. And I was very, very surprised by this. Now, there's not a lot of MJ missions. There is a few, about 2 or 3 of them. But they changed the way it was, and it was actually enjoyable to play in comparison to how it was previously. Another thing that I liked about it was the side missions themselves. Peter has his own side missions. Miles has his own side missions. And when Insomniac says that they recommend you play both games prior to jumping into this one, it is because everything that happens in the previous 2 games holds merit in this game. So it is recommended that you do go play the predecessors if you haven't. Yes, you could do a recap, but the recap is just not the same as actually playing those games. As for the open world and New York City itself, well, they obviously expanded it by adding 2 new regions and making the map almost double in size. Now, the map itself, New York City, fantastic. It looked amazing. It was very, very well put together. The areas were distinct. You could tell which is which. The only thing I will say is that the open world activities, so not the main mission, not the side mission, but the little activities that you can do, those activities, while I did find them fun, it was nothing special in the wake of comparison to what other open world games are. They're there. Some people might find them uninteresting. Some, might enjoy them. But obviously you need to do them in order to get all the suits and upgrades, etc. But overall, the open world missions were nothing special. It's the side missions and the main missions that, were interesting for me at least. Another thing I want to touch on with regards to Spider-Man 2 was the reported bugs and glitches. Now, I can only speak from my own experience. I know a lot of people, I've seen the social media posts about all these assorted bugs and glitches. For me, personally, I only experienced one visual bug in my entire playthrough. It took me roughly about 20 hours or so to finish the story. That included doing all the major side missions, and I experienced one visual bug. There was no crashes whatsoever and no other game-breaking bugs. The visual bug happened when I was just perched up on a ledge, taking in the scenery, and I noticed there was a visual twitch with Spider-Man that appeared. But that was the only glitch I had with the game. Other than that, performance and polish, it was top tier. I had no other issues other than that. The last thing I want to touch on for Spider-Man 2 comes in the form of the boss battles. The boss battles in this game are absolutely amazing. It's like they called up Santa Monica Studios and said, hey, how did you do those old God of War bosses? Because they really, really do amazing work with the bosses. Again, I'm only showing the opening boss scene with Sandman, and that is done for spoiler reasons, because the later bosses, if you think Sandman is good, wait until you see some of the later stuff and what happens there, and you're going to be like, holy shit. So, the boss battles in this game, they pull no punches. They are absolutely fantastic. In conclusion, Spider-Man 2 is the Spider-Man game that every Spider-Man fan wanted. It is a beautiful looking game. The graphics, the materials, the textures, everything's fantastic from a visual standpoint. The dialogue, Spider-Man is smart, he's witty, regardless if you're playing as Miles or Peter. The main story's fantastic. I spoke about Kraven, how he steals the show. Venom is really cool. Again, I'm not spoiling it. And overall, this is a game that any single Spider-Man fan would love. If you are a Spider-Man fan, you will absolutely love this game. It is, in my opinion, the best Spider-Man game they've ever made, period. Insomniac knew the assignment and they performed it masterfully. Kudos to them. Overall, I highly recommend Spider-Man 2 to any Spider-Man fan. Even if you are not a Spider-Man fan, I recommend going back, play 2018, play Miles Morales, then jump into this game, and you will not be disappointed. I loved my time with Spider-Man 2. I literally took the long way to everything because I wanted to enjoy this as much as I possibly could. I absolutely loved it. As a Spider-Man fan, this is definitely a Game of the Year contender for me. One of the best games released in 2023. As a Spider-Man fan, I adore this game. It's top tier. Kudos to Insomniac. I'm personally giving Spider-Man 2 a 10 out of 10. This is Veteran Gamer, and I hope to see you guys next time.